Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Facebook. I'm going to let Facebook gather everyone here and we will start a cool discussion. I have some amazing friends with me. So um, I'll let Facebook gather everyone and we'll get started. I'll ask you guys why friends are jumping on here. How's your week been? It's been a pretty heavy week, y'all.
A very heavy week for sure.
Very heavy week.
Yeah, this is my fourth day of the week, and this is my fourth or so Zoom session. So I am physically still tired. I'm off tomorrow, and I have another one on Saturday, Apostles Prophets Roundtable. So I'm like, God, can the brother get some break?
You're zoomed out, Glenn, huh?
Yes, sir.
I thought I'd probably never say that. Well, thanks everyone for joining. You will continue to join. This is Daniel. We are going to continue the discussion that I launched on Tuesday called Race Plus Reconciliation. And pretty stoked. If you saw the interview that I had with two of my friends on Tuesday night, it was pretty raw, it was real, it was honest. And we're going to have the same type of conversation tonight. So welcome to Race and Reconciliation Part 2 with three of my amazing friends from different areas. We got Florida in the house, Pennsylvania in the house. We got the great city of Chicago in the house. So I will introduce these guys and then I'll do a disclaimer and then we'll get started here. So if you guys will, Glenn, Katie, and JD, obviously, Katie, I know her as First Lady Cade. She is my one and only First Lady. The only First Lady I'll probably ever have. And Glenn, I call him Prophet because he's extremely prophetic and he was a pastor and we worked in ministry together. And JD, we are growing friends who pastors an amazing church in the Chicago area. But if you will, just tell a little bit about yourself, starting with Glenn, and we'll go to Katie and then JD. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you are currently doing, and tell us a fun fact about you so we can get to know you a little bit.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm Glenn Collins. I'm not going to go through titles. I have them, but I'm not a fan of them, as Daniel can tell you. I'm actually a retired Air Force major. That's my fun factor. And another fun factor would be that once I retired, I became a United States professional tennis teaching pro in my spare time. And a third fun factor for you guys is my kids and I started a venture called Allo. Allo means because we're different. We have a Monday night podcast where we talk about a lot of issues that are going on within our family and also issues that are taking place within our current world. I pass it along to First Lady Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie and I currently live in Pennsylvania and I've been working in child welfare for about 6 or 7 years and I'm working on an advanced degree now. And a fun fact, I went to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's estate last year and got to walk in the room and stand in the room where the Constitution was drafted. So that's cool.
Okay, you can't keep those things from me, First Lady. I need to know those things.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
You didn't? Yes, I went last year. Yeah.
That's legit. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Got to walk through and see like where his slaves lived, and
wow,
it's huge.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. JD.
All right, I'm JD, and I live in Oak Park, which is the first suburb just on the outside. Our eastern border is Chicago proper's western border. So we are the first place that you move after you decide that your kids don't want to go to school in Chicago. And so you move to Oak Park, which is due west of the city, about 9 miles from the lake. My fun fact is that I'm a PK who ran away and wound up with a church 20 years later. And so my wife and I have been in charge of a church for 3 years, and we have 5 amazing kids. And I spent the first almost 2 decades of my life as a commodities trader, specializing in short-term interest rates.
Ah, that's amazing. That's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
JD, again, I shared this before we came on. I got to know these guys, all of them, Glenn, through a ministry when I first had finished school, and Bible college. It was my first all African American church that was being planted at the time. And they heard me sing and threw a shoe at me, and I found out that a shoe meant that I sang good. Uh, and Glenn, you don't know this, but I went to our School of Kingdom Ministry. I spent the past 9 months, just graduated here at the church, and we have a thing where we throw shoes if the preacher is preaching good. So sometimes people who take online classes and they see a shoe being chunked at them, it means that the preacher's preaching real good.
You better preach.
So that's how I know Glenn. Of course, Katie and I, we met through makeup. I was working as a clinique manager, and like I said earlier to these guys, we locked eyes on each other and never been able to separate since. She is my one and only first lady. I brag about it, and I love her to death. Thanks for being on. And of course, JD, he was ministering at his church. A mutual friend of ours introduced me really to him by his series that he was preaching last summer, I think it actually was. And I was so moved that I messaged him. He's not a big Facebook Messenger guy. And he was like, bro, why don't you get at me at Marco Polo? And we Marco Poloed from my office. And we've continued to chat and become friends since then. So it's really an honor and a joy to have all three of you here to talk about race and reconciliation. As a disclaimer, before we kind of get started, I just want to say, based on my position in service to my local church and community organization, the opinions expressed here today are intended to be a general but specific to the nature of conversation. I want to let you know that you might hear expressions of words, spiritually based Bible theology, worldviews, and progressive ideologies not condoned or endorsed by my local church or my current business that I work for. Though I fully honor my house of worship and business, I do invite those who see differently, who have different worldviews than myself, who are progressive in their theology, and who might not even consider themselves faith-based. These conversations are around a complete open table who welcomes everyone. So I just want to make that disclaimer. Let's get started with the first question. Obviously, we're talking about race and reconciliation. This is an extremely heavy topic right now. As you know, George Floyd was completely killed in front of our eyes. I believe cold-blooded murder. Everyone's experiencing this heaviness. Let's talk about it. How has this racial pandemic in the past several weeks personally affected you as leaders?
I'll go first. I'll take a first stab at it, if you guys don't mind. Daniel called last week, said, hey, Prophet, can you jump on a podcast or Zoomcast tomorrow? That's unfortunately, bro, I'm recovering from food poisoning at the time, and I'm just too weak to do it. It's not that I didn't want to do it, because I really did. I've had several phone calls, several texts, several emails doing the same thing. This is my fourth one this week. And in fact, I kind of wanted to hold off until I talked to my sons first. And we had a Zoom call this past Monday, and we talked about it. I wanted to know how they felt as millennials and how they felt as Zers as it relates to them before I really begin to express my thoughts to others. But me personally, I had a moment last week as I was recovering, and I began to say, God, it has to be more to it than this. You know, we go from one event to the next event to another event, and it seems like nothing seems to come out of this thing, if you will. And I'm a very optimistic, very positive person. But I got to a place last week where I said, God, I had nothing else to give. I had to come to a place where I really had to encourage myself in what was going on, because if not, I would allow myself to partake of the same negative spirit which we see that's rampant in our country right now. But once I regained my bearings, I began to say, God, what is my part in this? How do I move forward in a direction to make things better? And, to take it further, being a retired Air Force officer, to be a Black Air Force officer, you are part of what I call the 3%. 3% minority officers, and of that is 1% Black males. So oftentimes I'm sitting in these meetings where many people don't get it. They think that because you're of a certain hue, then things should go in a certain direction. So for me, it's always been a challenge. Right down to where we live here in Naples. When I go outside to go do cardio, I carry an ID. I carry my phone with me, but more importantly, I have to rehearse in my mind what I would say in the event that I'm stopped. Now, here's the catcher. I'm an apostle of the Gospels. I have a doctoral degree. I'm a retired disabled veteran that's faithfully in the army to serve our country. But yet I have to be prepared to ask the question of, am I being arrested? Am I being detained? Or am I free to go? So at some point, it all comes to a boiling point. And if you're not really grounded in who you are, then it's easier to allow certain aggressions to take over.
JD, talk to us a little bit about, obviously you're not Black, at least I don't think that you are. Talk to us a little bit about how this has weighed heavy on you. I know that I've read some things that you've written on social media and how this has personally affected you and your church. What has this been like living in Chicago, and you mentioning, listen, there's possible looting in your area? How have you dealt with the weight of this death and the experience of looting in your own community?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that really happened was we talked to our kids, and hearing Glenn say that he had a conversation with his sons. I mean, we have 5 children ranging from basically 17 to 8. So we've got a bunch of little babies, and just had an opportunity to talk to them and say, do you understand? Do you know what's going on? Do you know why there's tension? Do you understand what's going on? And I mean, you and I had a great conversation about COVID, and everybody's kind of at this boiling point. And yes, we had looting and rioting about a mile and a half away. And so it was, that was scary. I've never been in a situation where we were curfewed. We were curfewed in our village. And for the first time, I had a realization of a fear of my safety. And it dawned on me that I was experiencing something that brothers and sisters of mine that are members of my church experience on a daily basis. And it gutted me. It caught me to a place where I decided that today I was going to go march. I was going to go march from Village Hall down to the 15th precinct of Chicago, and I was going to stand up for what has to change. And so I have been in a place of lament, if that's the right word, but also I don't know how to be angry. I don't know who to be angry at, and I end up being mad at myself, and that's not helpful. And so we hosted a conversation very similar to this last night. We had a couple of gentlemen on and a panel of African-American women, and it was really powerful. And just being able to process it and being part of the community has really been helpful. We have a multicultural church. I wouldn't exactly say it's diverse in the sense that you're not gonna, every shade is represented, but the difference between those two, there is a difference. You're gonna hear white music, if I'm in charge, and we'll figure out a way to grow in that. But really been challenged. I've been scared. I don't get scared very easily, and I am sad. I'm sad.
Yeah. I think I can relate too with, I've realized that I'm angry and I don't know who to be angry at other than myself, and really trying to process what that looks like. So I really appreciate your honesty there. First Lady Cade, talk to us a little bit about what you've been experiencing in this time.
Just total devastation, fear. It's just another tragedy in a long line of recent tragedies and past tragedies where you're seeing a Black person be oppressed and murdered, and they have no recourse for fighting back. He was screaming out. Nobody came to his aid. And when an onlooker did try to come to his aid, they were stopped. He was being held down. We literally saw this person murdered before our eyes. And I'm wondering if that's why we see this intense emotion from people, because of we literally saw it. It wasn't a story that we heard on the news. It was something that we could witness for ourselves. And for me, it just evoked some of the old resentment that I felt growing up as a Black person in a predominantly white, conservative, racist town, where I was subjected to both covert and overt racism, where I was called the N-word. I was told to go pick cotton. I was made fun of for my hair and my skin tone. And, when I would have an interview on the phone with somebody and walk in, you could see that they were completely surprised that it was me, because they were obviously expecting somebody else. And that created an insecurity in me. And it does for a lot of Black people who have always been made to feel inadequate and less than. And I honestly am at a loss for words about what to do and what to say, because this has just become part of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I am happy to see that people across the board are coming out to protest, whereas the protest in the 50s and the 60s relating to the civil rights movement, they were mostly Black. And now you're seeing this, I call them neo-activists now, where people who are white and they are privileged and they're just getting to know how privileged they are. They're coming out and speaking out, and they feel things differently and understand things differently. So on one hand, I'm devastated about another calamity in our culture, of somebody dying at the hands of a person in power. But I'm also happy to see that there are changes, and they're pretty significant changes coming. So that's what I've got for that.
I'm definitely hoping to see some changes. And, I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about this today. We have seen riots before. We've seen protests before. We've seen looting. We've seen violence. I thought that we were making changes when Michael Brown and all the looting were taking place in Ferguson. I thought that was when we were going to see a shift, but obviously we've not made that shift yet. We are still dealing with a racial crisis, and I'm passionate, one, about those that are marginalized. I'm passionate about those who are treated differently, and I have a great passion for PLC, for people of color, my Black friends. I'm passionate about it. Like I said, with Glenn, I served at a predominantly all Black church. Like, these are my people. I often tell folk I'm Black. I love my Black friends. Like, my godson's Black. Like but knowing that I have so many Black friends, I never realized how racist I was. And I think that's the challenge that I'm really being awakened to. Not saying racist towards I would do harm. I was racist based on not understanding really what racism means. And so obviously we're going to talk about that, but I want to ask just this question. And Glenn, I'll start with you. In your opinion, what was it about this specific incident? Again, talking about looting, violence, crime, death, white man killing a Black man, the Black man being marginalized. What was it about this specific incident that's caused such an alarm for justice in our world, to the point to where we're seeing churches speak out like never before? We're seeing white pastors speak out more like never before. I have never seen the alarm and the wake-up call in our world that I've recently seen. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never heard so many white churches stand up and fight for justice for the black man like I've seen. What was it? What do you think? What do you feel has been this? What's alarmed? What's caused the wake-up call? Why now? Why didn't this happen with Michael Brown? Talk to us a little bit.
Well, the first thing is you have to go back in history and realize that Dr. King said that rioting and protesting is a language of the unheard. And it's been a lot of unheardness amongst people of color, minorities of all hues. And the one thing here that really brought everything out was media. In times past, CNN had their slant, Fox has their slant, but people in their cell phones. People saw firsthand that this law enforcement officer had his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 40 some odd seconds. There was no denying it. And at that point, people couldn't say, well, it didn't happen. They couldn't say it was fake news. They couldn't say that, no. The media is trying to get us to be divisive. You know, when I was the executive pastor at this church locally, we had a panel. The panel was similar to this to talk about racism and things of this effect. Majority of people of this church were Caucasian, and we wanted to try to bring in diversity and inclusion to be able to talk about what's going on in our communities. When we had this panel, no one in that church could believe that racism was as rampant as it was. Although they try to do things for the marginalized, they refuse to look at the things that are right in front of their eyes. And this is one of those times where there is no smoking screens, there is no sensationalism coming from Fox or whoever it's coming from. Myself, you, JD, Kate, we all saw this live and in living color. For you to say that it didn't happen, you missed the point. Now, the bigger issue is what we've seen to happen within our country is as soon as something like this in the past has happened, the first thing they say is, well, this person has a rap sheet from here to Timbuktu. But this time, although it's being mentioned, it's not even coming close because what we're seeing is there's a call to accountability for our brothers in blue, but then there's also a call for unification amongst Americans. Now, let me clarify this right quick. When people ask me, what am I? Am I Black or am I Black American? I said, I'm American. They say, well, you don't call yourself a Black American? I'm like, on my whatever, I put American because if I go to Jamaica, they don't say that they are Black Jamaicans or Asian Jamaicans. If I go to France, they don't say that they're Black French or white French. They just classify with where they're from. Now, this is one thing that it has the ability to galvanize and bring us all together as long as we keep the main thing. And the main thing here is understanding that there was a crime committed publicly, everyone saw. We can't deny it. The second thing is, how do we move forward? Because you mentioned earlier about Ferguson and Mike Brown. And I know JD, he mentioned something earlier as well. Well, I was privy to a conversation with a mentor and one of his friends. And he said that during Ferguson, that the church did not want to be heard from. That Jesse Jackson was there. They booed Jesse Jackson. Al Sharpton came. They booed Al Sharpton. They asked for a representation from their culture, someone that understands. So as JD said earlier, the church has got to make herself more relevant when it comes to these type issues.
Man, it's good. JD, you want to tag on that?
You know, I think it's interesting because I think at some point it's very scary to be a white pastor in a multicultural church and to say something because I think I'm going to get it wrong. Pew Research did a thing a couple of years ago about why Christians don't share the gospel. And it was a staggering number. Somewhere north of 80% of people don't share the gospel because they're afraid they can't defend it. And I feel this as a white man who realized his privilege not too long ago, you know, in a very candidly, very humbly. I didn't realize what I had until I took the time to read Insider Outsider, until I read White Fragility, until you start like piling into these things, The Color of Compromise, and you're like, oh my God, I have actually been fed a bill of goods because I was told a story by the victors and I never heard the story of the other side. And so I think it's very scary. And yet the culture that we are raising up, our church is younger, and we have a culture that is filled with millennials, Zs, and here comes a culture that says we demand accountability, we demand
Yes.
authenticity, we demand vulnerability, and we demand transparency. And if you're not willing to come to the table with those things, we're actually not really interested in being in church anymore. And so all of a sudden there's a new level that says, okay, you know what? Like, enough is enough. And I'm willing to stick my neck out and get it wrong and say the wrong pronoun and say the wrong hue or shade or say something stupid because I'm sick and tired of feeling like this inside and I've got to get something out. And so, you know, I feel a level, I think that you're starting to see the church speak out because the new generation is demanding that the church look relevant. And if we're going to look relevant, you got to speak about sexuality. You got to speak about racism. You got to speak about politics. You got to speak about all these topics that the church is never talking about. The church talks about like morality and money. Like, F off. Like, let's actually talk about what's serious today. And, you know, I have a personal goal to drop every 4-letter word from the stage, but, you know, that's.
Man, I think that is so good. I think it's, I know for me, it's been, I've been listening and learning, slow to speak, but really I want to listen and I want to learn. One, because I care about the people in America. I care about Black people. I care about the fact that they have been mistreated and we continue to see this racial divide. Why do you think, you know, Katie, I just want to ask you this, like, why do you think that we are still not beyond race?
Because our country was founded on white supremacy. You had this group of wealthy white men from Britain come over and establish this country, and other white people were coming, but they were poorer, right? And they had slaves come over. And so white as a race concept didn't exist until the colonial period. So you were associated with the country that you were from. And it only became relevant in the colonial period when they needed it to. These rich elites needed something to hold on to their power. So they made this broad category of white people so that poor white people could be involved and feel like they had now this intrinsic worth because they are now categorized with these people. And then there were the Black people. And so I think because it's so entrenched in our culture and the laws and systems over time have been built on this idea, it's hard to remove it. I think that's the basis of why it's so hard and so painful to bring about change in our culture. I do, because all you have to do is look at the beginning and see what we were founded on. And it's going to take diligent effort from people like us to create change by challenging the system, by saying we're not going to take it, by hitting the streets, by protesting our government and demanding more for each other and ourselves.
You know, to jump in on that, Daniel, if you don't mind, I'm with that 100%. You know, the era in which we live is not protesting alone as far as marching, but these venues. You start looking at what we can do via social media. As JD mentioned earlier, the churches are going to take a 30% hit as far as people going back to the building themselves. But look at how much more we can get accomplished using these mediums that we're using now. But in using these mediums, we have to have something that the next generation want to hear. You know, my sons are PKs. And when we have certain discussions, I ask them the tough questions. What are your thoughts about church? My youngest boy, youngest son, he's 23. and he's like, well, Dad, being a person this stature, a young Black guy going to med school next year, a lot of my friends, they see me as a Black guy, but they say I'm not Black. They call me an Oreo because I talk correctly, because of how I carry myself and the things that I do. I'm like, Oreo? What flavor? And then my middle son, who's in a same-sex relationship, that there are people who come into him and say, well, you're a Black guy, but you are with a white dude. What's up with that? Why would you make things more complicated? I'm like, it's life. You love who you love. You with who you're with. Bottom line. Then my oldest son, he's more of a free-flowing type of individual. He's musically inclined, but when it comes to church, he wants nothing to do with church because, in his estimation, the church has missed the mark. And we start talking about what we're doing tonight. We're trying to say, you know what? Even as Madonna reinvents herself constantly, we, the people of God, we need to reinvent ourselves to hit the mark that needs to be hit all the time.
Yeah. And reinventing, I think you bring up a great point. This is a time for us to reinvent, I think, who we are as I'm a believer, and I know I have a very wide audience of people who don't claim faith in God, but I think it's time for Christians in churches to reinvent themselves in regards to how we respond to social justice issues. You want in on this, JD? I mean, what do you think? Why do you think that we are still in? Why do you think we're still not beyond race?
Yeah, I really liked what Katie said about the piece on America being founded by white men who are landowners, and you needed a machine, and the machine happened to be slaves, because it was the easiest, cheapest route. And it's interesting that it took me almost 40 years to hear that message. To actually hear that message. And it's one thing to say it on a forum like this, and this will get out to, this will end up with 2,000 airplays and people will hear this message. It's another thing that you got to be ready to hear it. And we have to move towards a level of education that's not only telling the other side, we're talking about the church. We claim as the church that we are the Israelites, that our story is the Israelites. Dude, white Americans are the Babylonians. And if you haven't heard that yet, if you don't know that you're the one with your boot on the neck of the oppressed right now, it's a really challenging topic to hear. And most of the people that I say something to don't want to listen to me anymore. And so it's delicate. You have to walk in that. And yet I realize that I'm not called to raise a flock of thousands. I'm called to be responsible with the few that are in front of me, and I'm called to make followers of Christ. And so we need to educate people to move past race. It's part of our job.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And that goes to my fourth question or thought. I've heard it said that racism is not about our individual points of view or actions, but rather it is a system and an ideology about which most people are unaware, and that privileges one race over the others. I'll start with Glenn. Can you discuss or maybe talk about ways specifically, with your own opinion, that white people and others, or maybe I should start with JD, as a white guy, let's talk or discuss about ways specifically that white people and others may remain unaware of some kinds of racism.
Yeah, the term racism, I grew up going to the poorer of the two high schools in my town. All my teammates were young Black guys. I could jump well, so I fit right in. We were great. We had a lot of fun on the football field. I thought I was fine. I really did. I thought I had zero racism in my system. And come to find out, years later, I didn't realize the microaggressions that took place in my life, the way I responded almost unintentionally, but when you make sure that your wallet's in your front pocket, when you see somebody walking towards you.
Mhm.
When I would change the tone of my language, when I would be less than amicable, like it wasn't as though I was being overtly, oh, I really hate such and such because of the color of their skin. It was this little tiny crap that over time, oh God, I can't even imagine the amount of weight that has to lay on people. And to both Katie and Glenn, I want you to know, I am sorry. Like, good Lord, I think of the story of Pilgrim's Progress and the guy with the backpack, right? He's got this backpack of rocks. And I'm the guy who's responsible for throwing these rocks in your backpack. And it's like, man, what am I doing? It's like, and so, but again, I wasn't racist. I would never call myself racist. And here I am actually being unaware of my privilege. And I think that's probably a bigger topic, and I'll let other people talk on being unaware of privilege. Because that's a scary thing when you realize that being unaware of privilege doesn't mean that my life was easy. I was a PK. We're PKs. PKs
Right.
don't have easy lives. It
Right.
just means that my life wasn't harder because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
It didn't make it more difficult.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. G, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's been raised in Virginia. You see things as they are. Growing up as a young Black male, you are taught the written rules, but you're also taught the unwritten rules. There are things you say, there are things you do, there are things you don't say, and there are things you don't do. There are places you go, there are places you don't go. I often tell people that to this day, there are places where I lived that were white only. And even now, some places they're still white only. You only go there if you're going to do some service for them, and then you leave. I say that to say, at some point, we're all responsible for our actions and/or our inactions. I could have made a choice years ago to say that all white people are the problem. And the fact of the matter is, JD, it's not you alone. It's a whole system, as Kate alluded to earlier. It was built upon a system for others to walk upon, and that's what they've done quite well. Now, for me, because I recognized where I was, but I also knew that it was more to life than where I was. I had to do things and carry myself in ways that my white counterparts did not. My dad, he's a Marine engineer, and he told me early on, he said, son, whatever you do has to be done 10 times better than any person that's white. Because they're gonna look at you differently. Say again?
Black tax, that's what they call it.
and the unfortunate thing about that statement was it was correct. When it was time for me to go to the Air Force, again, very few Black people. And then the crossover from the enlisted side to the officer side, even less people of color. But what I tell anyone is that to be Black is a calling, because not everyone can be Black and do it well. And when you begin to understand the magnitude of the weight of a people that's upon your shoulders, when you begin to succeed, they succeed. Any failure that you have is seen upon differently. I've sat in numerous classes of advanced maths and advanced sciences, and I realized that I am the only person of color in here. Why is that? Because we have often been told that we're less than. As Christine Kane said earlier, her research, it said at one point we were 3/5 of a person. We weren't as smart as white people. Certain things we couldn't do. But here's when the light really came on for me. My alma mater is University of Central Florida. I was in this one class called Computer Science 101. We called it a weed out class. It was a class of about 1,000 kids my junior year. And what I realized was everyone struggled. White, Black, Asian, Latina, you name it. At that point, the light came on to me and I said that you are no better than me. But what I really found out was we struggled together. And then my last thing is this I'll share with you, and that is when I was active duty, we were having this intense conversation about Section 8, people that are poor versus people that are entitled. Someone made this comment and said that no Black person that's on Section 8 would ever be worth anything. My comment to them was, are you sure? They said, I'm quite positive. I said, well, if that be the case, then here I am, a major in the United States Air Force, your boss, signing your paycheck. And you trying to tell me that I'm never going to be worth anything? Mm. Oh, no, sir, that's not what I mean. You're different. And that's what white people say when they realize that you've gotten to a certain place, you're different. But at the end of the day, I'm not different. I'm called to be me.
Mm. Man, that's such a powerful statement. Katie?
Yeah, I want to first start out by saying, JD, bravo. Because in talking candidly about what you felt on a subconscious level, it brings about an issue that people have, but they are unwilling to admit or even have an awareness to, which is implicit bias. And a lot of officers who were tested have implicit bias, and it's bias that occurs on a subconscious level, and their beliefs and attitudes against one group of people that are driving you to act in a certain way or think in a certain way, but it's subconscious. Like, you don't even really know it until you one day say something or you're talking about it with somebody and you can process through and say, whoa, what is that about? And then you can explore it and overcome it. But I don't blame you. I'm not resentful towards you. I blame the culture that we live in, because for years, decades, they've been peddling out certain images of us, certain stereotypes about us that just get reinforced over time by people. And if you don't know a lot of Black people, or you're not exposed to the best parts of our culture, you're not going to know that that is not consistent across the board with everybody. And a lot of people are like that. I grew up in a town where it's 0.5% Black, and they very much operated in the same way, where they thought, because I'm Black, I should be this way. And unfortunately, I'm a human being, and I developed how I developed based on the value system and the beliefs and how my parents raised me, which had nothing to do with my race. And so I wish people would know that, but people have to get to a point where they are open and receptive to learning about other people. They need to understand, especially white people need to understand, that there is a history behind your privilege. First of all, you need to recognize that you have it. And then secondly, you need to understand the history there. And you need to be open to listening to us about our experiences of not having the privilege of going into a store and not being followed, or not, our hearts are beating out of our chest if we see a cop behind us, because we don't know, one little slip, what our fate could be in that moment. And I think if white people remain open to hearing about our stories and to walking with us, this could all change. And I have seen it in my own hometown with people that I was raised with, people who were closed-minded, people who didn't know any better, who have changed over time. So, I don't know what else.
One follow-up to that, to Glenn's, or I think it was Glenn mentioned, have the conversations about where to go, what the unwritten rules were and the written rules. I never got those. I never got those rules. Nobody told me those rules. And I realized that, I've read enough, and I've heard enough people say, like, well, yeah, there's the real rules, and then there's the real rules. It's like, what are you talking about? What rules am I missing? And to Katie, Have you taken the implicit bias test done by Harvard that's online?
No, but I went through a training through the University of Pittsburgh, but I will check it out.
I have the link. I can drop it in the chat on the Zoom, or I can send it to Daniel.
Yes.
It's fascinating. I flunked.
You flunked.
It's amazing. Like it makes you identify good and bad, and then it says, you know, it's just a little test, and it bases on how quickly you can respond. And I flunked, and
Yeah.
that was a wake up call for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how you change it, by acknowledging it. It brings
Yes.
it brings a pang of consciousness, like, whoa, I didn't even know that was there. Well, of course you didn't. It was on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
So you are doing what others should do, you know, by just being candid about it.
Yeah.
That's the only way that you can fix it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, is that we have to, I said this in the last, in part one of Race and Reconciliation, that we have to shut up and listen to our Black friends and let them tell us, listen, this is right, this is wrong. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. I was talking about this in the first interview with two leaders in church. I have a best friend who's Black, and because of the way I was raised, the perception, the way I was raised, and the way I saw my family interact with Black people, I thought this was normal. So anytime I hung out with my Black best friend, you know, we'd always go out to eat, and every time she ate, she would get chicken, and it was always a chicken sandwich or chicken this and chicken that. And so every time we hung out or we would get around other people, I would immediately, you know, say, you know, hey, girl, I'll just order for you. I'll just get you some chicken, because I know that's probably what you're going to get, you know. And then I would refer to orange drink here. And then I would refer to when she would eat fruit, you know, she would eat, you know, watermelon. I would say, look, girl, let me just get you some watermelon. Yeah. And I never realized how racist I sounded. I mean, I sounded like just a sick pig. And I went back and I was listening to, you know, how Facebook sends you like memories of experiences that you had with your friends. Yeah. And there was this video, and I went back and listened to this video. And when I heard it, I just began weeping. And she would always say, you were so racist. You were so racist. And I never listened to her until I actually heard me say it with my mouth. And for good 15 minutes, I just kept on making all these racial remarks. And I started weeping, and I just started thinking to myself, I am clueless. Like I sound like an evil pig. Why didn't I listen to her? And it's taken me, JD, it's taken me a long time to get to this place for me to admit, you know what? I was taught something that was wrong. And I need to admit that what I was taught was wrong. And moving forward, I need to shut up, and I need to listen, and I need to learn how to talk, how to communicate, how to minister to, how to be the difference when it comes to racial acceptance. Someone said here, I like what they asked. They asked, can someone just talk about this really quick? Everyone has opinions of what is everyone has opinions on what the most important thing white people can do to help. But can you speak to that? What can we do as non-Black people to stand beside you, to speak up for you, to fight for you? What could you tell us that we can learn from and do and be, other than holding a sign and walking 3 miles saying no justice, no peace?
Ladies first.
Thank you. I would say just listen. Honestly, that is the biggest, I think that's the number one thing, is be open and listen. Just listen. Because a lot of people don't know. And so I think because they are removed from our experience because of their privilege, they have no idea what we experience internally and then out in the world. And so I think having them sit down and having us tell them to bring a new reality to them. Like, wow, that really happens. Yes, that really happens. And you need, and I think that's why some of my friends from back home have changed, because they not only see it, they understand it from my perspective in the stories that I tell them about what I have been through. They had no idea. They had no idea. So listen.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Listening is one part of the equation, but then endeavoring to make a change within your own self is the second part of that. Because sometimes people hear, but they're not really listening to what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to figure it out while we're explaining to them how we feel. You can't tell me how I feel unless you walk that mile in my shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And therein lies the biggest challenge. At that point, you're not listening because you're trying to figure it out. We don't want you to figure it out. We want you to listen to what we're saying and then continue to listen. Because here's the thing. Sometimes it requires more than one interaction before someone gets it. And we have to be just as willing to continue to share our story as they are to listen to our story.
Mm.
Because even tonight, we've talked about a lot of things between myself, you, Kate, and JD, that people will have to go back and listen to over and over and over again to find those nuggets to say, oh, this is what they meant when they said, listen.
Mm.
I want to add to that. They may not, our friends, our white friends, our non-Black friends may not be able to relate to our experiences, but once we tell them how it made us feel, I feel like that would foster connection and compassion, because you can relate to the feelings. You can relate to not feeling like you belong. You can relate to feeling rejected. And maybe that would also give them a better sense of the pain, why we are in so much pain. It may not totally explain it, but it would give them a sense of why it is so painful. It's over and over and over again.
Yeah, Dame, I have a quick reattack, please. Also, as it relates to the George Floyd incident, a lot of white people are now having to answer the question from their kids. Mommy, Daddy, why did they kill that man on national television?
Yes.
Or on social media? So as we say back home, the chicken has come to roost. so now everyone has been forced to deal with these issues across the board because the next generation is asking the questions. And I believe that the millennials and the Zers will be the one to continue to lead the charge. And I also believe that as they ask questions, we can't keep giving them the okie doke to say how things were, because they're a lot smarter than we were. They have Google, they have other things they can go to research. So we must re-educate ourselves in some things as well.
Yeah, the access to information is big. The old cliche that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, it's really hard. And I'll speak as a younger pastor. It's very hard to change the opinions of people that are older than me. It doesn't matter what the topic is. But I have an opportunity to speak life into a younger generation, particularly my kids, and I have to leave this place better than I have it right now. And that doesn't mean for my privilege, that means for us as Americans, that means for everyone. I have to, that's my responsibility is to speak to that younger generation. Yeah,
that's so good. Listen, I know that if you have been watching, we've been doing this for about an hour, and I have about 15 more minutes left. I have about 3 questions left, and I'd like to get through them and give everyone a chance. I understand that Pastor Glenn, Prophet Glenn, can be with us only for a short, limited time. So anytime that you need to go, Glenn, just excuse yourself. Thank you for coming on. But I'd like to ask, there's 3 questions left. this question has weighed heavy on my heart since I had put this together. It's discuss how our perceptions of race and racial identity influence what we consider as good, positive, appropriate, and traditional appearances of a hardworking person, a safe neighborhood, a reliable world leader, an all-American couple, an artist rendering of Jesus, Mary, or Moses, or a kind of pastor leader I want in my church or organization. That's a little bit of a weighted, heavy question, but
Yes, it is.
I felt
JD,
like we
you go
needed to go.
first.
I feel like we needed to go there. Glenn, why don't you go first? Because I know that you're on limited time.
Oh no, I'm gonna write it out. Go ahead, JD, you got it.
Okay.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm really looking forward to hearing Glenn and then piggybacking on it. You know, Father Richard Rohr. So if you guys are Richard Rohr fans, who's a Catholic, he's a father, he's down in Arizona, and every year he holds a Center of Action and Contemplation. And last year he had a series of paintings, and I can pull them up on my Facebook. I don't have access to them, but all of the pictures were of Black Jesus, very dark-skinned. Everyone in the Bible was very dark-skinned. And it was getting away from this idea that Jesus is a white American male with blue eyes, slightly brownish blonde hair that is flowing and looks very Caucasian.
No way.
It's very difficult. I don't know a single Middle Eastern person that looks like that. I barely know any white people that look like that. And so we've made up this fake idea of what Jesus is to best suit the dominant culture's interests. Because religion is a control device, and I don't want your money, I want your heart, and that means that I need action out of you. And if it's all about controlling your action in this like manipulation way, then I'm going to put the most powerful figures are going to look exactly like me so that I can piggyback off of them, just like I was going to do to Glenn just a second ago. So I think we need to get away. I think it's the job of anyone who stands in front of people and speaks from a theological or religious perspective. It's time to break the idea that Jesus is a white American man with blue eyes. It's time to say that Hagar was a sex slave that was probably black. And it's time to actually acknowledge some of the hurt and the pain in Scripture. And are we going to do this? Are we going to move into that? And so obviously I come from a theological school, and I'm going to push those buttons on people. But when it comes to identity, and we're big on identity. I love talking about identity. I love who God made you, as long as it looks like me, right? That's the subtext. It's true, right? Like we love it. We love it when people change, man. I love it when Katie changes. I love it when Glenn changes. I just don't love it when I have to change. And so if they change, then it's okay for me. And being the dominant culture, then that has to give way too. And nobody likes to change. They like other people to change and then help them out. So I didn't answer your question at all. I threw a bunch of stuff at you.
Oh, hilarious.
Hey, it's real. And let me just say this before you comment, Glenn.
Okay.
You know, JD, I just hearing you say that just about identity, because we are very heavy identity culture driven. The church that I go to is very, very identity driven. And just to hear you say that out loud gives me peace and makes me want to cry, because we're all about seeing other people change, but are we willing to actually reflect on things that you need to change as a leader? And that's the real question is, do we really want to change, or do we just want the people around us to change? And I think this is the big picture. This is what we need to be talking about, because it isn't just about you changing. It's about me changing, and it's about us changing and us shifting this culture with a new mentality, a new ideology, a new theology, or maybe it's the real theology, really what God's heart really is. you know. Glenn, what were you going to say? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, man! I love this dialogue. This is actually what's needed amongst humanity across the board. We need to have more venues like this where we can talk openly and be transparent. But therein lies the problem. A lot of people are afraid to be transparent for various reasons. They think that if they're transparent, then they're going to lose some friends. You know what? If you lose them, they were never your friends anyway. You know, when it comes down to making change and being resolute in things, this is how it starts. We have to come to a place of commonality to say, you know what, here is the problem that we see, but here's how we move forward in that problem. There's a quote by G.K. Chesterton that I want to read to you guys. He said, the Bible tells us to love our neighbors and also to love our enemies, probably because generally they're the same people. And that's the challenge when it comes to doing what we're talking about doing. You know, there's an absence of that L word, love, when it comes to loving our neighbors as ourselves. Once I understand that everyone around me is my neighbor, it makes it easier to make certain decisions that's best for humanity. Okay, you see me and you say that I'm less than, I know who I am. You know, it boils down to the individual knowing their worth. It boils down to the individual saying that I'm not going to settle for who you say that I am. I'm not going to settle because your perception of me is skewed. You know, we are a Black couple, my wife and I, and we live in a predominantly white neighborhood. And our motto is this: we have to have representation at certain places for white America to realize that there are Black people that are just as successful as they are. We have to be places and do things where they see us and it's not expected. We have to be in the boardrooms and not just at the table, but we have to have a voice that speaks the things that we desire, the things that we want. It reminds me of a movie back in the day. Spike Lee did a movie called Do the Right Thing. And there was a scene inside the pizzeria. And the conversation was, the guy said, Sal, we put some brothers on the wall. And Sal said, I'm not going to put any effing moolies on the wall. And then he said, well, what about Michael Jordan? Well, Michael Jordan's not Black. What do you mean Jordan's not Black? So then he said, well, what about Prince? Prince is not Black. Well, what about Michael Jackson? He's not Black. They're celebrities. And I think sometimes when white Americans see certain individuals, they see their celebrity, but they don't see the color of their skin.
Wow.
That's the one thing that puts them into a category that's different than the rest of us. Should it be that way? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I do understand that people's perception as far as the things that they see positive is often built based upon their past experiences. So what we try to do is we try to paint ourselves into positions, or put ourselves into positions where we are shouldering the brunt of it. You know, you said for a hardworking person, you know, we believe in working hard and playing hard. You know, you talked about a safe neighborhood. Black people want to be in a safe neighborhood just like white people. Why is it that when Black people move into a white neighborhood, white people move out of certain neighborhoods? Why is it that white neighborhoods get more funding for their educational system than Black people? And then we say that they're marginalized. Well, guess what? They wouldn't have been marginalized if you would stay there and say, we're going to work this thing together. It's going to take us working hand in hand, not just a protest, not just a riot to say that problems need to change. No. When we get to a place of economic stability where we can live in the same areas, don't leave because we came into the community. Obviously, we can afford to be there. And if we can afford to be there, then this is a change agents that we need. Now, as far as various renderings of Jesus, you know, we've seen it, blonde hair and blue eyes, but that's contrary to anything the scripture says. So that type of stuff, I don't worry about. Here's the thing with me. Things out of my control, I've learned not to worry about. I learned to give those things over and say, God, these are God problems. You have me here for a finite amount of time to accomplish a certain task. Whatever that task is, that's what I'm going to do. So for us, because we understand that we can't change this, This is not going to change. So the best we can do is live a life above reproach, live a life of excellence, live a life where people begin to say, is something different about you. And if they say it's something different about me, JD, then what will happen is it begin to change your entire perspective about the people. Now, case in point, you go to a restaurant for the first time. If the food is good, you go back. If the food is not good, you don't go back. If your first interaction with a person of color is positive, you're willing to be more amenable to do it again. If it's negative, you're not.
Yeah. God, bro, if I had a shoe and you were right there, I'd be throwing it at you. So good. So good. That's like I picture you're like Obama. You're dropping the mic right about now. Like, damn, that was so good. Katie, what are your thoughts?
I don't even know where to. I don't know where to start. Like, it was such a. There's so many aspects of the question, and I kind of got lost in the answers of the others. Sorry.
Just piggyback.
Where,
You know,
Just make it up. Just piggyback.
Okay.
You're good.
Make it up. We're good.
Let's go.
Ooh. What I will say is this, and I know this was brought up. I had a conversation with my friend this week, and because of where I grew up and the fact that a lot of the people were racist and had implicit bias, I experienced this. They had these thoughts, these negative attitudes and feelings and beliefs about Black people as a whole. But I noticed that they would create an exception for me as an acceptable Black person, and she's okay. And I don't actually see her, and she's great. But I didn't realize until recently that those people actually did not like me. How could they? How could they like me when they can't see me, when they don't know me, when they can't appreciate who I am on my deepest level? You don't care about Black people, really. You don't care about Black issues. You don't see me as a Black person. Then you don't see me at all. And I can't have you in my world. So, I mean, that's what I could say to that. I don't know what else to say.
I will say, as both you and Glenn were talking, I can relate to you in one way, and that's as an LGBTQ plus identified person who am often seen by my gifts and my talent. But when I identify with who I am as an individual, I'm marked as unqualified. I'm marked as not spiritual enough. I'm marked as I'm not good for the job. And it's the only way I can relate to what you're saying. But we can't change who we are. We are who we are. And it is allowing God to use the person that we are to be a voice of hope. And it's why I live by this motto. I will always value a person for who they are, never discredit them for what they're not. So I'm going to value you for being the Black woman, the princess, the first lady, Cade, that you are, the prophet, the man of God that you are, the veteran that you are. I'm not going to discredit you because you're Black, because there's beauty in your color. There's beauty in who you are. You're defined by something greater than my definition. You are defined by the God of the universe as something profound that's remarkable. And it shame on me for not listening. Shame on me for being silent and not speaking up for you, for my friends, for people in my church. Shame on me for looking at you and disqualifying you. Not me personally, but us as a culture for looking at you and disqualifying you because your color is different than ours. And I echo what JD said earlier. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that you have been treated this way. I'm sorry that you have to tell your kids before they leave, don't put the hoodie up. Don't put your hoodie, over your head when you go jogging. You can't do those things. Hey, like Lucilla said Tuesday, I had to tell my son, take the the roads where there aren't a lot of traffic. Don't go on the freeway. You know, I'm sorry that you've had to have these discussions with your kids and think about the conversations that you might have to encounter if you get pulled over. That isn't fair. That isn't right. Shame on us as a people for allowing you to go through such things every single day. I want to ask, I want to move along quickly here. I know these two are pretty loaded questions too. Last two questions. What do you believe moving forward, trying to reconcile this racial divide that we're in? What do you believe needs to shift for us to experience peace in cross-racial leadership without this racial divide?
There is no short-term solution for a long-term problem.
Good word.
You start talking about people that have been oppressed for a long time. It's going to take some time to come out of it. But more importantly, it's going to take various individuals coming together, willing to have conversations and not have a one-time conversation. You start talking about events of the past, Ferguson and so on and so forth. I believe that a lot of that stalled because we saw it as a once event. We have to continue to have these conversations amongst key leaders to make things happen. And actually, I take that back. Grassroots, like Black Lives Matter, is the reason why it's as big as it is now, because they didn't let it go.
Mission. Yeah.
So what happens is we have to get to a place, and this is the perfect time for a reset. COVID-19 has us down, and now this is like the coup de grace with the situation here. This is a great time to say, you know what, America, let's press reset. What do we need to do to make a change that's going to affect Americans across the board? And it can't be politicians, because politicians are going to say one thing, get in office, and potentially change. It's going to have to come from us at the bottom and let it filter itself up. It's like, when we watch these memes or watch these videos on social media and they go viral, we need these type things to go viral to the point where we develop audiences and people are willing to say, you know what, I can get with that. But whatever it is, it has to be powerful enough to grab the attention of who's left of the great generation, of the baby boomers, of Gen X, of the millennials, and also of Zers. So we have to find that thread, that common denominator, where we all can work together to say, you know what, enough is enough. Now, how do we do this together?
Yeah. Honestly, Glenn, I just got to tell you, Megan, someone who's been commenting on our thread tonight, she says, Glenn, you need to write a book, man. and I agree with her. It's like when you speak, I'm silent and I'm like, my God, I don't know what else to say because it's just so profound. What are your thoughts, Katie and JD?
You want me to go, JD?
Yeah, I would love that. I actually have something, but we'll let you go because we defer to the First Lady.
Well, I agree. We are all part and parcel to the solution. And you're right, we can't rely on politicians, because I just rewatched the 2016 presidential debate with Trump and Hillary, and they talked about the racial divide and the effort they would make if they were in office to lessen the gap, and none of it has been done. They talked about community policing and doing this and doing that. Trump has not talked about that at all. So what we need to do is like the grassroots efforts. What we need to do is there are organizations out there who work with politicians on policies that directly impact people who are oppressed. And it takes a lot of diligent effort by individuals on a micro level, on a meso level, on a macro level to really affect significant change. And I agree with you. I think that sometimes people get so caught up in the excitement of of what's going on in the news, and then it dies out, and then something else happens, and then it dies out, and then it happens again and it dies out. We need to continue to keep the momentum going, because this will continue to happen, because change is slow, it's painful, and there's going to be a lot of casualties. But we can mitigate the number of casualties by continuing to work together towards systematic changes.
So good.
Yeah, and I would add one thing from last night from our discussion on a similar set of circumstances, that we have to move past thoughts and prayers. If the response is consistently thoughts and prayers, they send them out. It's like, hey, if we're all believers, or if you have faith, I'm not even sure who you are. I believe everyone has faith. I'll probably get in trouble. I'm going to skirt away from that topic for just a second. I believe that everyone is going to pray at some point, and thoughts and prayers are going to happen. Of course, they're going to happen for the believers. Like, is it some random choice? Well, I'm going to pick B. Oh, it's thoughts and prayers today. It's like, no, everybody's going to have thoughts and prayers. Are you going to do some action behind it?
Yes.
Are you going to go and march and stand next to somebody who doesn't look like you? Are you going to follow Sean King on Instagram? And are you going to sign up at grassrootslaw.org or whatever his brand new organization is? Are you actually, hey, you know what? Most Americans give less than 5% of their income to anything. Why don't you give 1% of your income to actually putting some substantial change? You want to give to the church? Watch me turn around and give my money to that, because that's what it means. Like, you have to do something. You got to put some action behind the thoughts and prayers. Otherwise, again, it just kind of all melts. It melts in the news cycle. And in 3 weeks,
Yes.
Like, I'll be very, very candid. In white America, this is all going to blow over in 2 weeks. Yep. We're going to be fine. And the entire plight of a marginalized people will continue to have the knee on the back of the neck. And that's not okay. Until a substantial number of white people actually get off their ass and do something about it, it's really disappointing. And so, as leaders, as Christian leaders, as parents, as people who have influence, and you got to use it, and you got to do something with it.
Right. I think, JD, I'm going to, piggyback on what you said. I think that we are seeing protests, but things are starting to calm down a little bit. And it's when things calm, we go back to our norm. Mm-hmm. And the reality is we're having to face a new norm now because of COVID-19. We need to face a new norm with this racial divide, and that takes me to the final question of the night. Like, moving forward, two of you have been in ministry, and First Lady Cade, I like the title for ministry, but we don't know if she's called.
Yeah. How much time in ministry?
Yeah. How will your local church experience, ministry, organization, and or life witness prepare you three to be in the community with people of other races, especially when there is a racial strife and division in our nation? In what ways are you willing to work towards building change towards ongoing relationships, community engagement, and honest dialogue across racial lines? I'll start with you, JD. Like, obviously, I know that you were kind of talking about this on social media a little bit. Like, what are some of the things that you're going to change and you're going to shift just in your church to, well, yeah.
I gave a sermon that you referenced earlier back in September, which I would have said was probably my most challenging sermon as we were working through some of the sexuality issues within Scripture. I was actually scheduled to record our sermon for this weekend today, and I had to pull an audible because I wasn't ready, and it was hard. And I haven't been this scared to give a sermon against white supremacy ever. It's very challenging. But if you're asking me what I'm willing to do, I'm willing to lose everybody who's at my church to find people who are willing to look more like Jesus. I'm not willing to leave my neighborhood when we go into lockdown and curfew because I have the privilege of driving away and getting to a safer spot. I'm going to stand, and I'm going to take a stand, and I'm going to give, and I'm going to use my voice and my influence. And however I got 5,000 Facebook followers, they're going to hear about it, and they get to hear about it, and they're going to get to hear about it, and they can unfriend me, and I don't care. Like, I don't care. I don't care. The opinion of man, I've kind of lost it. Yeah, we all want to be famous. We all want to be popular, sure. But again, I'm not called to make a giant church. I'm called to make disciples that look like Jesus. And that's where I'm headed. So, yeah.
Love that. Glenn, Katie?
I would say Mark Twain says that there are two important days in a person's life: the day that you're born, and then the day that you discover your why. And this is an opportunity for many people to discover why they were born. There are people searching for answers and wondering what's next. What's next is healing within this country. I'm a strong advocate of prayer and faith, but I also understand that faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that we have to do as a people to ensure that we make this place better than what we found it. For me, a church that we currently attend is predominantly white church. And when we go in this church, I'm not on staff at this location, they look at us like we don't belong there. But we go back, we at the time we shook hands, we hugged, we say the right things, and so on and so forth. And then we become part of groups, and it's in the group settings like this where we have the most impact. How do I know that we have impact? It's when we get back to church the following Sunday, and one of the guys says, "Hey, this is Dr. Glenn, and he's an awesome man of God," to all of his friends. Then all his friends started to say, "Hey, this is Dr. Glenn from so-and-so. He's an awesome man of God." It changes one person at a time. But we have to be willing to make that investment in that one person. A lot of times we want the numbers, we want the mass. We got to come to a place of recognizing that it may be a conversation with JD and I, and then the conversation with Dick we just had, it goes out to people that I never met. I see myself as a bridge builder, conduit, people, connector of people. And why do I do that? Because it gave me opportunity to meet people like First Lady Kate. Never met her before. But yet at the same time, the things that we're sharing tonight, her people will also see it. Never met me.
Yep.
But
that's Megan who's talking to you.
It makes an impact in their lives. Daniel, we may have discussion, and you may share some things we talked about to other people. I may have never met them. But the change has already begun to take place within you and then within them. So JD, I applaud you, sir. It's not about the 99, it is about the one. Because history says that if we would treat Einstein correctly or treated him right, he would have been a Christian. But the fact of the matter is we treated him with anything but respect. I think it all starts with love. It starts with, and also with respect for humanity. And as we move forward, we have to understand that it's not about trying to please everyone, but it's about making that connection to one person. Paul said, "I become all things to all men so that some would be saved." At the end of the day, what Paul was saying is, I understand how to connect with those around me. And we have to learn how to connect with the culture around us to effect change. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So good. Katie?
Yes. So for me, I'm pretty reserved. I think you know that I'm pretty reticent about talking about my personal life and my personal experiences simply because I don't think that it matters. I don't think that people would care. And it's only recently with your inspiring me to speak out that I found my voice where people are listening. And the messages that I have and the experiences that I share are valuable to people. So I need to continue to push myself to sharing my experiences with others, sharing my struggles with others, because I think that there are a lot of people who look at my life and think she was raised by a wealthy white family and she was afforded some privileges that other Black people don't have. I was told that most of my life, and that just wasn't true. I was subjected to the same racism, discrimination, and hateful words and comments from people throughout my life, and prejudice throughout my lifetime. And I need to let people know that just because my Black experience was different than yours, we can still bond over the experiences that are innate to Black people in this country. And my experience is no less than yours, and yours is no less than mine. And together we can really help people understand who we are as a people and how diverse we are and how special our experiences are. So.
Guys, I want to say thank you so much for just having this conversation. I'm walking away moved. I'm walking away more educated, more aware. I'm also walking away convicted of what I can do in my own personal life to continue to be a bridge builder and help make change. You know, my personal life, I want to be known by my love for humanity. I wake up legitimately every single day and I look at myself in the mirror and I say these things to God. God, help me love stronger than I've ever loved today. And let me be known by my love for all people. Every day, I don't go a day without saying that in the mirror before I leave my home, because that's what I want to be known for. And yet, every day I face moments to where I can judge, where I do it wrong, I get it wrong, I fail. But it's admitting those wrongs and making them right. It's apologizing when I need to apologize. And again, I am deeply sorry to Glenn and to Katie and to all those that are watching that are people of color that have been marginalized, mistreated, experienced the prejudice of our world, of our government, of our leaders, of our pastors, of our churches. I'm sorry. And I want you to know that I'm listening, that I'm tuning in, and that I'm learning what I need to do as an individual and as a person to stand beside you, to fight for you, and to speak up for you. Not just now, and not when this passes in 3 weeks, but forever, until the day I die. I want to make the difference, and I want to stand with you. Thank you for joining us. Please, if this encouraged you, please go back and share it. We love you so much. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys doing this with me tonight. Bye,
Thank you.
Facebook.